I have a lot of people who've asked me for pardons. I call him Puff Daddy has asked me for a pardon.
Just 3 days after Diddy was sentenced to over 4 years in prison on prostitution charges, President Donald Trump seems to confirm he's heard from the mogul's legal team.
Reports are blowing up across the country right now, and it looks like Diddy might actually walk free. But this time, it's not because of the court system or some legal loophole. It's because of Donald Trump. That's right. Word is spreading that Trump himself has stepped in behind the scenes.
It's a great city potentially. You know, I told you, the head of the Union Pacific Railroad said, "Sir, save Chicago. It's a great city. It's going to be lost if you don't do it." We have no choice but to do this. And when judges give us rulings that, you know, you don't have to do it, Portland is on fire. Portland's been on fire for years. And not so much saving it. We have to save something else because I think that's all insurrection. I really think that's really criminal insurrection. So I appreciate the question. These are unsafe places. We're going to make them safe.
Would you invoke the Insurrection Act, sir?
What?
The Insurrection Act? Under what conditions or terms would you invoke?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary. But we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe. And it's turning out, and we started with D.C. It's been so successful. Think of it. People wouldn't go to restaurants. The restaurants were closing. We were losing a lot of restaurants, as you all know. And now restaurants are opening and they're thriving. Not only is it not under control, it's the opposite. And I believe they're afraid. They're scared for their lives. You look at what's happened with Portland over the years. It's a burning hellhole. And then you have a judge that lost her way, that tries to pretend that like there's no problem. Actually, she's not even saying that. There's a huge problem in Portland. I'll tell you what the problem is: crime. Okay, crime. There's a huge problem in Chicago. It's called crime. And we want to put out the crime, and they want to inflame the crime.
Mr. President, Governor Abbott offered up the Texas National Guard to you. Have you had any other conversations with other red state governors?
Yeah, I have. They're willing to offer. Every one of them is willing to offer whatever we need. We thank Governor Abbott of Texas. Every one of the red state, as you call them, red state governors is willing to give whatever we need, because they want our agents protected. You know, these ICE agents have a tough job. They have to go in and get, in many cases, stone cold criminals, hardened criminals, long-time criminals. And every, essentially, Republican governor has offered up whatever we need. And some Democratic governors also. Daniel?
Yeah. The Supreme Court is back in session. Yeah. They rejected today an appeal by Ghislaine Maxwell to overturn her conviction. That means her only chance at getting out of prison is a pardon from you. Is that something you're open to?
Who are we talking about?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
You know, I haven't heard the name in so long. I can say this, that I'd have to take a look at it. I would have to take a look. Did they reject that?
She wanted to appeal her conviction.
And what happened?
They said that they were not going to hear her appeal.
I see. Well, I'll take a look at it. I will speak to the DOJ. I wouldn't consider it or not consider it. I don't know anything about it. So, but I will speak to the DOJ.
Why would she be a candidate for clemency, sir?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to speak to the DOJ. I'll look at it. I have a lot of people who've asked me for pardons. I call him Puff Daddy has asked me for a pardon.
But she was convicted of child sex trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to take a look at it. I'd have to ask DOJ. I didn't know they rejected it. I didn't know she was even asking for it, frankly.
The talk of a potential presidential pardon is shaking the internet to its core. What began as whispers in legal circles has exploded into full-blown headlines, and the reaction is pure chaos. Sources close to both sides claim that Trump's team and Diddy's lawyers have been in quiet contact for days, maybe even weeks, with discussions starting right after Diddy's sentencing. When his legal situation seemed hopeless, the idea of a pardon was floated, a bold, almost impossible move that only someone like Trump could attempt. Now, insiders say it's no longer just a rumor, it's a real possibility. To understand how we got here, you have to see just how bad things became for Diddy. The court gave him one of the harshest sentences ever for someone of his profile. The media buried him, the industry turned cold and his name went from power to poison overnight. After his first few brutal days behind bars, reports started leaking.
Of his TV show The Apprentice. The problem is, some comments Diddy made about Trump in recent years as Diddy really entered the political realm. There's a video where he's speaking to radio host Charlemagne saying, if Trump gets elected, I really do believe in my heart there'll be a race war. In another video on Revolt, he says white men like Trump need to be banished. And by the way, you know who's not letting anyone forget this? Combs' rival 50 Cent. Took to social media recently, wrote, see, Trump don't like S like this, buddy. You run your mouth too much. And Donald doesn't take well to disrespect and doesn't forget who chooses to go against him. While working tirelessly to make America great again, there is no room for distraction. He would consider pardoning anyone who is being mistreated, not Puff Daddy. And let me tell you, the idea of Trump pardoning Diddy is not getting a ton of love out there. Conservative commentator Megyn Kelly posted on X, Trump should not pardon Diddy. He doesn't deserve it. He's a Trump hater. He's a woman abuser. MAGA is already upset over elites seeming to cover for each other. This would not help. GOP struggling with young female voters, most of whom will hate a Diddy pardon. And then you just had other random accounts like America First. What? He's actually considering this? Diddy is a depraved, abusive, sexual deviant who should be spending the rest of his life in prison. If Trump pardons him, he will get absolutely crushed. Who is advising him lately? It's looking like straight up sabotage at this point. There were other accounts that were not in favor of it, although there was this account. Milo posted on X, Trump has no choice but to pardon Diddy after the government, led by James Comey's daughter Maureen, simply lost interest in Diddy's guilt the moment they secured his tapes incriminating powerful Democrats. The prosecution was a shambles. The trial was a farce. Now, I want to talk about if this is really going to happen, how it would happen. Also, if it really depends on bail and sentencing, then what are we talking about? And I have somebody who not only has been following the Diddy case from the very beginning, not only is a renowned criminal defense attorney, but actually has obtained federal pardons from the president, including from Donald Trump. By the way, for his clients Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, those were maybe the most notable. I'm joined by Bradford Cohen. Bradford, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, before I even get into the pardon, okay, there's a bit of breaking news before we were going to come on. This is what I want to get your opinion on first. So Combs' defense team filed a memo in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a motion for a new trial. And basically, I know you read through it, but basically the evidence, they would say, is insufficient to sustain that conviction. Their main arguments is really echoing what we've talked about a little bit when it came to the bail analysis, but that his prosecution, his conviction on these Mann Act prostitution charges is so unique. He wasn't profiting off of this business. All consenting adults were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking. They argued this isn't even prostitution per se, it's voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but he paid them for their time. Everybody was having a good time. He makes a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were typically videotaped so they could watch them later on. It's just amateur pornography. And then finally makes the argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO or sex trafficking, and would have never came in if he was merely being prosecuted for prostitution, particularly the Intercontinental Hotel footage of him purporting to beat up Cassie Ventura Fine. And he says, at the very least, he needs a new trial. I hand it over to you. You think this is a successful argument?
Thank you. I don't know if it's going to be successful in the judgment of acquittal. I think the argument is interesting because everyone agrees he might be the only person in custody right now that has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. The Mann Act, and it gives a nice history of the Mann Act, and a lot of people don't understand what the Mann Act is, but the Mann Act was enacted because of a racist motivation that white women were being recruited.
Reports say Diddy was breaking down fast, struggling to cope with the violence, isolation, and the harsh reality of losing all control. So when his lawyers first mentioned a pardon, most people laughed. It sounded desperate. But now, with Trump back in the headlines and aiming to reassert dominance ahead of another political push, the timing makes sense. Trump thrives on shock value, and there's nothing more shocking than stepping in to rescue one of the most controversial figures in entertainment today. Insiders say Trump's team has been carefully evaluating how the public might react, knowing it would spark outrage. But that's part of the game. Trump's power has always come from doing what no one else dares, from pardoning high-profile figures to flipping the script on his critics. and this situation fits perfectly into that pattern. Some sources suggest Trump and Diddy share mutual friends in high places. People who see this as a chance to kill two birds with one stone, giving Diddy a lifeline and creating a headline-grabbing spectacle.
By people of color to go across state lines and make money, so actually pimping those women across state lines and making money off of their sexual exploits. Obviously, that's not the case here. It's used so infrequently, it might have been a handful of people who were actually charged with the Mann Act. No one in custody currently has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. So it's an interesting argument to say, hey, listen, this Mann Act, the original reason for it was racist. The original way that it was applied was racist. The way it's applied here is incorrect because he was not making any money from quote unquote pimping or getting these women across, or men getting them across state lines. None of that was being done. This was all being done for entertainment purposes. So it's an interesting argument. I don't think this judge buys it. It might be interesting on an appeal, but I don't think the judge is going to give him a judgment of acquittal on those two counts based on the argument. Now, the more interesting argument to me, and it's their last argument for new trial, is that, listen, if you were just going to charge him with these two counts, which I originally said when I looked at all the evidence, and don't forget, I was getting calls during this trial from individuals that were telling me, hey, I have information that exonerates what they're saying against Sean Combs, essentially saying that Cassie and others were participating more than just having sex in a room. They were participating more than that. They were paying people. They were hiring people. They were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These were what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts. And he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts, but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking. And I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipts, all about that. Not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or two of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up? How bad he is, he's not a good guy, the video came out. Sometimes juries will split the baby, meaning, there's people that want to convict, there's people that don't want to convict, and they're like, okay, let's convict him on these acts. We can all agree we can convict him on these acts. He's not a good guy. He transported these men across state lines. Let's convict him on this. There's always going to be a question of that. The only way to not have a question of that, obviously, is when the jury comes out, someone gives an interview and says, hey, this is why we did it, is because, this tape was so bad and these other incidents were so bad that we were like, we can't just let him walk with nothing. So we convicted him on the Mann Acts. Now, we don't have a juror saying that. Do I think eventually jurors are going to start coming out? Yeah, I think so. I think some of these jurors are going to come out. They're going to want to do some interviews, not before sentencing. And I think after sentencing, I think some of them will come out and we'll discuss it, because I think that was the feeling I was getting from this jury and the reactions they had to Comey's closing, and
Trump
even the
gets
reaction.
Exactly what he wants: chaos, headlines, attention, and the sense that he's still pulling the strings in America's biggest scandals. If you look closely, you can see how carefully this rumor has been allowed to grow. No one from Trump's camp has outright denied it, and Diddy's lawyers haven't dismissed it either. They're letting the idea breathe, letting people talk, letting the story snowball. That's how power works. You plant the idea, then watch the world react. People are already taking sides. Some call it the ultimate abuse of power, a shocking example of money and fame buying justice, while others frame it as redemption, arguing that Diddy, regardless of what you think of him, has been crushed by a biased system and deserves a second chance. Both sides are shouting. Both are fueling the fire. And that's exactly how the story keeps growing. Social media has gone wild, with hashtags like #free and #TrumpPardon trending nonstop, and the debate is brutal. Some see this as Trump's way of cementing himself as the ultimate power player.
Just in general, to the 5 or the 6 U.S. attorney team, I think their reactions in general were very noticeable, and I think that this is a jury that wants to talk to people once I think he gets sentenced.
Okay, so now let's move on to the pardon discussion. So if he can't get relief from the court in getting the conviction thrown under a new trial, can he get relief through a pardon? Before we talk about, is this a real thing, what is the process to even obtain a federal pardon? How do you even go about that?
Sure. So it's a pardon or a commutation. If someone is actually in custody, they could also get a commutation, which does not wipe the crime off your record. It just allows you to get out of jail. So he has that option to give him a commutation. If he gets sentenced, he can also give him a commutation. But as for the process, there's an application on the DOJ website, and I'm part of some charities that also do a lot of pro bono work for pardons and commutations. You can fill out this form, DOJ website. It essentially lists the reasons why you should get a pardon, what kind of community service you've done, things of that nature. There's a separate application for commutation, but you can file a pardon application, and you could also say, hey, listen, if it's not a pardon, I'm looking for a commutation. You attach your indictment, you would reasons why you feel your crime was you were unfairly prejudiced or unfairly convicted. All of those things go into the packet. I always try to help people that are filling it out on their own to show them, what to point out. Those type of cases are always heartening, because those people deserve pardons. They deserve commutations if they're in, and it's some sort of crazy drug offense that was brought up in the 90s. All of those things are reasons for pardons and commutations.
So is this real? I mean, here's the thing. He is in a much better position to get a pardon or a commutation of his sentence because he wasn't convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering. There is a way to justify this based on some of the arguments I just mentioned that his defense team is making, that maybe he shouldn't have been brought up on this. The I-Man Act, not as serious as what he's facing. Is this real? Do you think that this is going to happen? That he's going to get a pardon or a commutation from President Trump?
So I don't know if he's going to get one. I do think that it's real because, like I said before, President Trump, whether they like him, don't like him, if he feels something is wrong, and we've seen this happen before in the past, if he feels something is wrong, someone got railroaded, someone was convicted, wrongfully, he will take a look at that. Yeah, Sean Combs has said things in the past that probably were not great. I've read them, but I think that if anyone understands that, I mean, look at President Trump's cabinet. There's individuals on his cabinet. His vice president has said things in the past that weren't great for him. But he understands that people evolve, people change their minds. People understand that there's certain requirements, things that are going on, certain pressures that they're under. And I don't think that would affect whether or not he would grant a pardon or commutation based on things that were said in the past. I think it would be based on what he gets sentenced to, or based on the facts of the Mann Act, that the Mann Act itself, I think, is unconstitutional. I think there's issues the way that it was applied in this case.
But from an optics point of view, I don't know, moral point of view, what about everything that came out of trial? The texts, the bruises, the intercontinental tape. It's not like you can say Diddy is totally clean, that he's a complete angel.
Some say Trump is the man who can make or break lives with a single decision, while others claim this is just another stunt to stir up his base and keep the spotlight on him, while the rest of the world scrambles to keep up. But the deeper story is what this means for Diddy himself. Insiders say he's clinging to this rumor like it's oxygen, telling close associates that Trump's got him and there's hope he's not done yet. His entire team is pushing the narrative hard because as long as people believe a pardon might happen, it keeps the pressure on, keeps his name alive, and keeps him relevant in a system that's trying to erase him. And a presidential pardon isn't small. It wipes the slate clean, overrides the courts, and rewrites history. If Trump actually grants it, Diddy wouldn't just walk free. He'd emerge as a man reborn, legally untouchable, sending shockwaves through politics, entertainment, and the entire country.
May remind them of instances of violence, etc. But she's choked. She looks a certain way physically because of the injuries, and she's still being required to do this. And he is saying more emphatically that thou shalt, you have to do this. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more like it in terms of you looking at the force part of this particular crime.
I'll tell you what's important. I think this is important. So we're talking multiple sex workers or male performers being allegedly used here. I believe we have names or nicknames like Don, Cabral, Leo, Antoine, Paul. And there was testimony about how the men were flown out and how they were paid. Like this back and forth. She was asked, do you know how Cabral got from Atlanta to each of these cities? By plane. Do you know who paid for his plane ticket? Maybe either me or sometimes Jess. Who is Jess? The travel agent. Whose travel agent? Sean's. In what cities or countries do you remember seeing Paul for these hotel nights? I remember seeing Paul in Los Angeles, Miami, and Turks. Although she did testify that he apparently booked his own travel or was already there. But she testified that she saw Combs hand cash to the male performers. She testified that Combs' security or assistants like Christina Coram would give him cash. She testified that she helped to pick the performers and even arrange for the flights of one male performer named Sly from Atlanta to New York, and she paid him $2,000 to $4,000. She claims that she got the money from Combs. She testified how Combs arranged performers to come over too, and she testified that the assistants had set up the rooms. Now, Joe, to me, does this all help a clear-cut case of transportation to engage in prostitution? One of the charges that Sean Combs faces, he actually faces two, one with respect to Cassie and one with respect to Jane. Does this support this? Does it support maybe even racketeering as we talk about the people in his inner circle?
I would say it absolutely supports transportation. And we've talked about this before, the whole idea that if you cut away the crimes and you're looking at the possibilities related to them, you would seem to have transportation because clearly they're flying people from one place to another, arranging for people's flights. These are people that you don't otherwise know, other than for their reputation as sex workers, if that. And you're flying them out there, and then you're paying them once they get in and have them engage in sex acts. So yeah, I think that there's an argument there. Now, the racketeering, perhaps. I've always thought that this was more of the square peg in a round hole kind of situation. But that being said, you're still looking to show him as having a criminal enterprise, right? In the racketeering, you need the two underlying acts. And it may be that, there's a garden variety of acts that you can use to be your two underlying crimes, right? And so what it may do is help to, quote, kill two birds with one stone, for lack of a better term, in terms of being one of the underlying crimes. So yes, I think it gets you on the road towards the racketeering, but I would say that if there was something that is, quote, easier, and I don't know that anything's easy here, one that's more clear, I like that word better, that's more clearly shown here, I think there's an argument that you show pretty well of the transportation with intent to engage in prostitution.
Joe, the defense cross-examined Jane a lot about all of this, and you talked about it. They questioned if she did this out of love and just to please her lover, Sean Combs, not necessarily being pressured as a victim of sex trafficking. She was questioned how when she got mad at him, it was a lot about, other women. So, they always talked about this as more of a relationship of jealousy and anger, not sex trafficking. There were definitely texts where she was complaining to Sean Combs about doing all of this, but still, what she allegedly kept on doing it, that she was given money, that he paid her rent, even to this day, that he pays for her lawyer. She was pressed on saying how this one hotel night in Turks and Caicos, she had 4 rounds of sex in 24 hours. That was the claim. And she claimed she was sore and crying, but then she apparently admitted she had so much fun on that trip. She testified how she helped bring in the male performers and there were graphic messages.
But here's the thing. This isn't really about law or justice. It's about power. Diddy's fall from grace has become one of the biggest stories of the decade, and Trump, the ultimate master of spectacle, knows that by attaching his name to it, he can make it even bigger. For him, this isn't about helping a friend. It's about control, about proving he can still reach into the darkest, most chaotic corners of celebrity and call the shots. Meanwhile, the rest of the industry is frozen. No one knows how to react. Former collaborators, business partners and artists who once distanced themselves from Diddy are now watching closely, wondering if they'll need to pivot again. Because if Diddy actually walks free, if Trump really pulls this off, the power dynamic shifts overnight. Diddy could come out of this more infamous than ever, hated by many but untouchable all the same. What's wild is that every time someone tries to shut the story down, another leak surfaces, Another source close to the team confirms a meeting, a phone call, or another quiet signal that something might really be happening behind the scenes.
Because it's going to depend on how the jury takes it, and they could take it two different ways. There are discussions where she's asking about using condoms. Clearly, that's something that she expressed a preference to wanting to do, okay? Is that enough for the jury? The fact that he did not seem to approve of them, okay? Or do we go the other way when we don't see her issuing an ultimatum saying, I can't do this if we're not using condoms, or having him even emphatically say no? He seems to express a preference, but does he emphatically say no? Does he threaten her if they don't use the condoms? Is there something else that makes it more final where she can see in both actuality and perception that she either does not use the condoms or else? So if someone is inclined one way or the other, I think you have evidence that you can take from their conversations to go either way. And that's what makes this difficult.
Joe, you know, she described in graphic detail how these sessions would end with the men, right? How they would finish up, and let's just say how Combs, according to her, didn't want her to clean up, and then they would have sex. You know, she and Combs would have sex after. And she even testified it was these moments with Combs that were the ones that she really enjoyed. She just wanted to be with him. That level of detail, that helps her credibility, right? And it doesn't appear that the defense is saying so much that this stuff didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it does help her credibility because it makes her more vulnerable and more honest. This is not something that somebody wants to sit on the stand and talk about. She clearly loved this man. She clearly wanted to be with him, and that comes through. And so the humanization, I think, is really important. She wasn't just a machine and just a robot, etc. But you also can take different things from that as well. But her honesty is really important. Stepping back, if a jury is trying to figure out what all of this means, they're going to ask themselves, what is she saying? Why would she testify as to this? This seems to be nasty and crazy and maybe even a little demented, but she's owning up to it. So maybe we ought to believe her. So from that may come that the jury is more inclined to believe her.
And the defense might not even be trying to say, hey, this didn't happen like you described. They might be saying, okay, yeah, this happened, but you know what? You're being called as a prosecution witness, and the prosecution is improperly transforming your testimony into sex trafficking and racketeering. And they might not be being incredibly aggressive with her on these details. They might be accepting these details as true, but just saying it's not a sex trafficker victim relationship, but it's a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. However, the details of this are important because you wonder if the jury's going to say, you know, maybe how they might be looking at Cassie and saying, could she really have consented to all this? Because let's talk about the time. I think the time is very important. Here's a back and forth from the transcript. She was asked, now, after you and Sean finished having intimate time together, what would you do before starting another round, either with the same entertainer or a different entertainer? I would just take a shower and get ready for the next one. Would you put on the same outfit or a different outfit? Different outfit. Then she was asked, on average, between May of 2021 and October 2023, on average, how...
The reason nobody can stop talking about this is that what's happening in the background isn't just about Diddy's freedom. It's about the system itself, that power protects power, that connections matter more than justice, and that some people are never really out of the game. Meanwhile, Diddy's lawyers are quietly celebrating the attention. Every new headline about a possible pardon adds pressure, keeps his name alive, and forces people to question whether the system went too far. It builds a public case, not a legal one, and that public case could influence what happens next. Trump's camp hasn't confirmed anything. They're staying quiet and letting the speculation work. That's the trick. Once the idea is out there, it takes on a life of its own. People talk. Media runs with it, and rumor becomes possibility. If the pardon actually happens, it won't just free Diddy, it will rewrite the narrative, turning him from convicted mogul to political headline, sparking outrage, protests, and endless debate. For Diddy, it would be the ultimate escape, not through the courts or appeals, but through power connections and the very system he's been accused of exploiting his whole career. The irony is clear. The same man who built his life on control, wealth, and influence might now be saved by the kind of deal making that made him infamous. He's gone from mogul to inmate, and now maybe back to a free man. All because Donald Trump saw an opportunity. Right now, Trump hasn't confirmed anything publicly. No statements, no press releases, nothing concrete. But that's exactly how he operates. He lets speculation do the work, letting people argue, protest, defend, and debate until the entire world is watching, and then he moves. So where does it go from here? If the pardon becomes real, Diddy could be out before the year ends. If it falls apart, it still keeps both men at the center of the cultural spotlight, exactly where they thrive. Either way, the story has already done what it was meant to do: remind everyone that no matter how bad it gets, Diddy still has friends in high places, and Trump still knows how to make the world stop and stare. The idea of a presidential pardon for Diddy might sound like madness, but in today's world, where politics, fame, and controversy are all tangled together, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. Whether it happens or not, one thing is certain: this story isn't dying down anytime soon, and if Trump really makes that call, the entire world is about to explode.